Maine, near Lewiston, also urged the public Thursday morning to report anything that might seem suspicious in their neighborhoods. And like you see this picture right here, I just want to make one quick comment. Like when I see law enforcement, right, and they have the weapons, and people look at you look at that like, man, look at that, bro. Man, they got some gear, man. Everything is sighted up. They got beams, they got lasers on these weapons and all that kind of stuff. And then, I look at the weapon, I look at the gear, I look at how these people are standing. I'm looking at their, what we would call their military bearing, looking at the hats and all that. Man, I don't think these dudes, I don't think these two dudes are ready for the type of pain that this guy can bring. I'm willing to bet anything that they do not have a lot of training with those weapons. I remember I had a neighbor in LA, LAPD. He was young LAPD guy, just got through there. Right. We were living in the same building. I used to see him when he was going through his training. He finally graduated, became an officer, then he was on the streets, and then, he was learning the ropes or whatever. Watched that, and then I'm just kind of watching him progress. And he got to the point where he can work on his own, and then he got to the point where he was like training other officers, right? And one night he came, we had something going on, at the apartment. And he shows up and he's like, "Hey man, are you familiar with M16s? They say that you were in the Army." And I'm like, "Yeah, I was in the Army. I'm familiar. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that weapon." So he was like, "Yeah, man." He showed me they issued him an M16 AR style, rifle. They issued it to him. And he was like, "Man, I think there's something wrong with this thing, right?" So he hands me the weapon, and I get it. First thing I do, I just break it all the way down, because I told him, he was like, "Well, I think there's something wrong with the weapon." I'm like, "Well, just do a functions check." I'm like, "It was just just do a functions check. At least you'll know if the thing is, you know, serviceable right now." And he kind of looked at me and he's like, He's like, what's a functions check?" I'm like, "Functions check, that's what you do to make sure that the weapon works without having to break it down. Like, if you don't want to do that, we could just kind of break it down, have a look at the bolt, make sure everything that the bolt's fine." And bro, he's looking at me completely like I was speaking in Chinese, man. I'm like, "How many times did they have you break this weapon down in training?" He was like, "We never broke the weapon down in training." They gave this man a military grade weapon, but they did not teach him how to field strip the weapon. It didn't even teach him how to field strip the weapon. Didn't teach him how to function check the weapon. This is LAPD. It's like one of the largest police departments in the country, if not the largest. And it was at that moment that I realized, like, man, these cops don't have any proper training. And then I'm like, "Yo, man, how long?" So I took the weapon. I did a quick function check. Everything checked out. I broke it down, pulled the bolt out, had to look at it, make sure it was cool. You know what I mean? I was looking for everything you got to look for. It's like all kind of little nooks and crannies. I didn't break down the trigger housing or anything like that. I mean, that's real advanced. I didn't do that. But, I'm looking at the weapon, put it back together, gave it to him, and I'm like, "You good to go, bro." From what I could tell, there's nothing wrong with that weapon. I mean, if you still think there's something wrong, you have to go see an armorer. Right. So you should be good to go when you hit the range. And we never really spoke about it again. And I wasn't looking any funny or anything like that. I was just helping out a buddy. Like, "Hey, no problem, man." But the fact that he did not have that training, and this was one of the more experienced officers now, like he's training other officers, right? And some people are like, "Well, one has nothing to do with the other." I say they do. How can you be on the streets dealing with what you got to deal with? I mean, you got a weapon, you're going to need that weapon. So, like, back to this picture, I see these two guys standing here, and I'm, on this picture, and I'm wondering, like, can they field strip those weapons? Can they break those weapons down? Can they perform a functions check? If so, did the PD teach them how to do it, or did they learn that in the military? Or does one of their buddies who used to be a paratrooper teach them? This is what I mean about training. Like, this is what I mean. Brother Cribby, like, "Did you ever train at Benning?" Yeah, I was at, anyone who goes to airborne school airborne school is at Fort Benning, Georgia. So I don't think that has changed. So that's where, I was in Benning in December of 1990. Airborne school, 3 weeks, Fort Benning. Think about Fort Benning, man. They have the NCO clubs, is a place called the Hidden Door. I don't know if it's still there, but back then it's just this the building. It's a nightclub, like for the NCOs, right? It's a nightclub, and it's a circular building, and it's all glass. At least it was, this is back in the '90s. It was all glass, and you sit there, and you don't if you don't know where the door is, you will spend 20 minutes trying to find a door to get in. So you just see people walking up, and we're just sitting on the inside of the club looking out. And you see people because it's one-way glass, and they're coming and they're like looking for the door, trying to figure out how to get in there. It's hilarious. And you just have to know how to get in. You got to know. People are like, well, how do you get in? I ain't telling you. Got to know. Go down there. If it's still down there, that's how you can tell, who the cherries are, who the rookies are, who the FNGs are, right? You see them coming. They can't find that door. I mean, it's just one of those things. You know what I mean? Brother Dino was like DL. I would say his main target was at the bowling alley. It all seems very well planned. Could be the female victim. Could be. Could be. Like, I guess we'll find out eventually what set him off or what's going on with that. But I mean, it could be. I mean, I'm pretty sure they got people speculating, trying to figure it out. Like, well, he went to the restaurant looking for someone. They weren't there, right? He did what he did at the restaurant. Then he heads over to the bowling alley. There they are, engages them plus anyone else just standing around or whatever, and then gets out of there. They're saying there's up to 50 people injured and or wounded during all this. And that makes sense to me. You got somebody come in at 7 o'clock in the evening. I don't even think the sun was all the way down. It could have been, I don't know. But you got someone coming into a public area like that, something like a bowling alley or a restaurant, and they start popping. Right? It takes a few moments for people to realize what's going on. But then once they do, you want to talk about stampedes, bro. Once they realize what's going on, man, it's stampeding. It's boy, it's crazy. Complete chaos. People screaming, people getting knocked down, ran over, trampled, people running into stuff, glass breaking, all sorts of stuff. So like, who knows? That may have been the case. But yeah, whenever I see law enforcement with high-tech weaponry, man, I'm like, how are they trained? That should never be a question. That should never be a question. If you see someone, law enforcement, I don't care what level, local level, all the way up to the fed level, you see them with weapons like that, you shouldn't wonder if they know what they're doing. That should not be a question. Then you see all this extra stuff. I would never have that much gear on my weapon, ever. Maybe a beam, because the SF guys, they're like, bro, you want to put a beam on there? They do it. That's how they got me to do it. And SF guys are like, bro, I do it. And I know you've never been on any kind of missions like I've been on. I'm like, oh, you got a point there. He's like, so if the most elite soldiers in the army, have laser beams on their weapons, like I want a laser beam on mine. But all that other stuff they have on there, man, that thing would be so heavy to carry, especially if you're going through the woods or whatever, man. Those wait a minute vines be clinging to everything, man. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. Even in the stock of this weapon, looks like it has a slot there to hold a magazine. I wouldn't want that there. But I don't know. I don't know. State police said a vehicle of interest was covered by the police in Lisbon. The vehicle matched the description of a vehicle that Carter was known to have been driving following the shooting. A 2013 white Subaru Outback with a black bumper, which appeared in the law enforcement bulletin. According to the law enforcement bulletin, Carter has two other vehicles registered to him: a 2022 Yamaha motorcycle and a 2019 Sea-Doo green boat. Both are registered in Maine. That's concerning to me. You got a motorcycle and you got a Sea-Doo. You got a green, like a boat. You got a watercraft in a place like Maine with all those water inlets and stuff like that. If he did plan this thing out and he's worried about getting away, he certainly had the vehicles to do that. So you got your SUV. You take your SUV to where your motorcycle is parked. You take that motorcycle and go to wherever you parked your boat. You get into that boat and you're on the coast in no time. Or you stay in your vehicle and just drive. I mean, they've been looking for him since last night around, since yesterday, 7, 8 o'clock PM. Dude could be in Florida or damn near to Florida by now if he just got on I-95 and just drove south. you know, man, that is if he did plan this stuff out, man, that's scary right there. The car was found in Lisbon near a boat launch. See, there you go. And that's on Androskagi River, which flows into the Kennebec River. Authorities said Thursday. CBS News learns that the U.S. Coast Guard crew uh, out of Booth Harbor have been searching waterways for the suspect's boat, focusing on the northern shore of the river. One of the areas law enforcement is probing in their manhunt. Dude might not even be in the state. I mean, you got to do what you got to do as law enforcement. You got to be methodical in your search. You just got to do it. You can't overlook anything. But this guy might not be in the state. You know, it's great that you got the Coast Guard involved, but when did they get on board? Like, when it's, and I'm pretty sure they got people who know this. I'm certain they're not going to be putting out information as to how they are tracking this dude. They're not going to, hey, news media, we're doing this. XYZ, we're doing it like this, 1, 2, 3. And I got sitting there watching the news, like, oh, that's what they're doing. Oh, they're looking over there. Well, let me move over here. So, I mean, it's crazy. No sightings of Card has been reported since Wednesday night, authorities say. With this man. So, brother Mandrell's in the building. What's good, fam? I see you. We're sitting here trying to we're trying to figure out what's going on, man. Like, not figure out what's going on, but we're just kind of talking about what's going on with this dude. I appreciate Mandrell came in with both his handle and the big picture, man. I appreciate that, bro. Appreciate that. So people are talk about the gun problem, right? The quote unquote gun problem in America. We got this problem with firearms, and we understand the Constitution, but the founding fathers didn't anticipate weaponry being to the type of weaponry that we have today. They didn't know that technology was going to do this. And when I hear that argument, I was like, yes, they did. they understood firearms. They want state of the art. The whole point of having a militia is just an instant army. So yeah, they want you to have the most, you know, tech, technically sound weapon is available. They want you to have the most up to date firearm, right? That's what I would argue. But the fact is, they wrote what they wrote, and we live by the Constitution in this country. So people who believe that we could just snatch all the guns up, it's just crazy. There are more firearms in this country than there are people. There's no way you can get them all. If you outlaw firearms, whatever type of firearm, all you're doing is making more criminals. There are Americans that are not going to give up their firearm. It doesn't matter. And I don't know a single person in law enforcement who wants to go door to door trying to collect people's guns. Like, that's not going to happen. And I wish people would just leave that part alone. Now we can talk about common sense regulations and reform. I have no problem with, if I sell a weapon outside of a gun store, to go down and register that weapon, like I do my car. If I buy a car, sell a car, you got to do all that paperwork. You got to handle that. You got to get a license to transfer the numbers and all. I got no problem doing that. I got no problem mandating that people have insurance and certain types of insurance for certain types of weapons. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with people having to qualify with their weapon. I would love to see that once a year. I would love to see once a quarter, but at least once a year. For every weapon that you have, you got to go qualify. Go down there, and the qualification can be just real simple. Go down there, load your weapon, fire. That's it. And you're done, right? Because that also doubles as proficiency. Get these guys out here walking around with these high tech weapons on their hip, well, not even on their hip, in their pocket, because they won't even get a holster, and they never even fired the weapon. So I mean, I would love to see that kind of thing. Like I said, insurance. I have no problem with that. I mean, there's some common law stuff, like, if you want, even in America today, if you want to get yourself like a 30 caliber 19 a Browning 30 caliber machine, like or even one of those old water cooled 30 cals, you can get one. You just have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get it. You have to go and fill out a lot of paperwork and do a lot of stuff to get it. But when people, we have these horrific events that occur, and people are lost. People are deleted. People are, they lose their lives behind this. I get it. It's terrible. It's terrible. The first thing they do is they start talking about, we got to do something. The numbers are just too staggering. We're losing too many people to active shooters. They'll just say just that column. Well, I went to the CDC website. Right. So I went to the CDC website. I wanted to see some stats. And if you go to CDC and you go to fast stats, they have these stats here, right? That we're going to have a look at. So mortality here, right? They have all injury deaths. Right. So they talk about different stuff, right? They talk about poisoning, they talk about motor vehicle traffic deaths, like the number of deaths from motor vehicles, 45,404. And that's death per 100,000 population. That's 13.7 people are lost in car accidents and vehicle related crashes or whatever. Number of vehicle traffic deaths. That's 13.7 per 100,000 people. The total number for this particular year was 45,404. That's how many people were lost. Then right under, they have firearms, right? All firearm deaths. We're not talking about like active shooter. We're not talking about deletion of firearms. We're not talking about accidents. All firearm deaths. The number of deaths, 48,830. Remember, cars, 45,404. Firearms, all firearms. We're talking about just active shooters, 48,830. Right? So that's 14.7 deaths per 100,000 people. And motor vehicles is 13.7 per 100,000 people. So there's no outcry to get rid of cars. There's no outcry to regulate cars any further. Yet, the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we lose basically the same amount of people to automobile deaths, traffic deaths, than we do from firearm death. All firearms. We're not just talking about active shooter events. We're talking about all of it, accidental, the deletion by firearm and the active shooter stuff. And this also includes like the gang bang and stuff like that. People just going out, popping at each other. All that is thrown in there. And it's pretty much the same. Brother Grio's in the building. What's good, man? Shout out to you, bro. I appreciate that. I appreciate everything you do, man. Keep doing what you're doing, man. I enjoy watching you grow. If anybody needs a photographer and you're in the Texas area, or maybe you come down here to Florida, that's the man you want to holler at right there, Grio's Vision. He takes care of it, video, right? Takes care of stills. That young brother's out there getting it. Brother Pitney Jules in the building. What's good, man? So keep in mind that firearm deaths includes legitimate self-defense and officer-involved facts. All that, all of it, all of it's in there. The deletions, the popping at each other, the gang banging stuff, the accidental stuff. You know what I mean? The active shooter stuff. All of it, all of that's in there. It's just so sensational, and it is what it is. And there it is. Self-deletion is included as well, roughly 60% plus. Exactly. All that's in there. All that's in there. And it's roughly the same as jumping in our cars and go driving around. And especially down here in Florida, man, I don't know if you guys ever been down here to Central Florida, man. These people down here can't drive. And the further south you go, the worse it is. I'm sorry. It's pretty much the whole state. These people down here can't drive. I've seen some of the wildest stuff on the freeways and streets and the highways and byways down here in Florida. People don't hesitate on the major interstates to stop their car and back up, bro. I just never occurred to me to do something like that. It just never occurred to me. Like, oh, you want me to stop and then back up? Like, well, I'm in the breakdown lane. How about we just go to the next exit, get off, and then get right back on going the other way? I've never seen so many cars flipped over on their top in my life. It happens so often, man. I tell jokes about it on stage, man. I get pretty good laughs from it. Right? I tell jokes about it. It happens so often. It's so familiar to people. Folks down here can't drive, but there is no push to get rid of cars or to further regulate cars or to mandate stuff with cars. You know what I mean? And that's my thing. It's like, well, I get it. People